Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Class. But the first thing we're going to talk about is Doctor Who. This week's episode, literally picking up right where last week's episode left off, with Bill and the Doctor in London, in particular 1914. A very good episode with just like an overall theme of like Bill continues to impress me with the fact that she's always constantly asking questions I feel like a lot of companions don't really ask that much, and just, I mean, there's certain situations that never really came up, because it's like, oh yeah, this is 1814, it's like, I'm really shouldn't like, is it really safe? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I mean, she's like, you want to go out there? She's like, yeah, of course, don't you? She's like, well, kind of look at me, you know, slavery's still a thing here. And he's like, right, he's like, yeah, it is, isn't it? And that's like, that kind of got me thinking, like, once again, been a while since I've seen the earlier seasons. Did it ever come up with Martha? I don't think it did, because I don't know, like, I could be remembering a lot of things wrong. Like the episode that always sticks out to me when it comes to the Martha season was like the introduction to the Weeping Angels. I will always remember that, because hands down the Weeping Angels are my favorite Doctor Who like creatures to come across. But I kind of hope we come across them this season. I don't think we've seen them for a while. I can't remember what was the last season they popped up in. Was it 7? Was it that far back? Have they subsequently popped up since then? Because that's how that whole Amy and Rory situation ended, with because of the them. I don't know if they subsequently popped up yet since then. Nevertheless, rambling on, I apologize. But I really appreciate, like it's interesting, because this episode had a little, obviously, like, it's Doctor Who, so obviously there's fun to it. Like, I love the whole conversation. You know, Bill's kind of asking her, like, so what are the rules to time travel and everything? And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, the fact of the matter is that obviously if I change something here, it's going to have drastic effects and I might not exist or something like that. Once again, another question I feel like not a lot of companions really ask about, and that's always the thing people always bring up about Doctor Who. Doctor Who's kind of flip-floppy about it. Not the words I'd use, but I have seen people kind of use that word, like, oh, Doctor Who's kind of like, its time travel rules are weird. But the fact of the matter is the Doctor kind of does whatever he wants to. I mean, to a certain extent, he always tries not to make waves. Obviously, you can make ripples, just not waves. But nevertheless, Bill's just like, yeah, like, what if and then the Doctor's like, oh yeah, you mean like your friend Pete? She's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, your friend Pete, he was standing right over there and he stepped on a butterfly and now you don't even remember. And she's looking like, wait, what? And she's just like, shut up. I was like, that's so good. Time travel humor. I mean, in a way, when you actually think about it, it's like, that's super messed up that they could, like, that's a super messed up joke. That's super dark, because it's like, yeah, you had a friend that, you know, messed up time and now he no longer exists and you don't even remember him. That's really messed up joke. But nevertheless, obviously in this episode, the main thing is this creature. We never actually get to find out what its name is. Maybe they did, and you know, I'm oblivious to certain things. But it's basically a creature that exists underneath the ice. And obviously, like, the Doctor kept being like, because, you know, at first Bill's like, okay, I'm seeing green lights, and he's like, oh yeah, that's just a side effect of time travel. Is that really a side effect, or was he just screwing for more? Like, I can't tell. I mean, maybe he took it back, but it's like, it didn't seem like it. I mean, at first I was like, oh yeah, I seen the dots and everything too. It's like, that was such a specific thing to say. So either it just lined up like that, or that really is the thing. I don't remember that ever coming up before, like any, like, real side effects of, like, time travel. But nevertheless, this thing ends up taking a boy in the episode. His name is Spider, because basically he's with this girl Kitty, as well as the other kids who just kind of live out on the street and are, you know, stealing to, you know, survive. And so the boy ends up getting taken, like, and the Doctor does what he does, like, as the boy's being taken, he makes sure to grab his sonic screwdriver beforehand, and she's like, and she gets super pissed about it. She's like, go save him. He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, she's like, go save him. It's like, I can't do anything. She's like, save him. And so it was interesting seeing that side of her, because it's like, oh, fun and games until it got serious, and then it led to a whole, like, very awesome conversation. And I thought was like, it's a very good thing, because it's like, yeah, it's showing you, oh, there's fun, and the fun and side of time traveling and stuff like that, but also the dangerous side to it. And not just that, but kind of the darker side to the Doctor. And she's like, she's asking all these questions. She's like, he's like, why are you so upset? She's like, I've never seen someone die in front of me before. It's like, we were literally at a place where you saw people's dead body. I mean, their bones, but still. She's like, that's different because the fact of the matter is they were already dead. This is someone that died right in front of me. But then he's like, that's kind of almost like semantics and stuff like that. And she's like, don't try and act like that towards me. She's like, the fact of the matter is, like, how many people have you seen die in front of you? And he's like, basically, it's like, I lost count. And then she's like, how many people died before you lost count? And even then it's like, he doesn't know. Then she starts asking the other question, how many people have you killed? He starts explaining, like, I only do it when it's necessary. She's like, I didn't ask that. How many people did you kill? Let me guess. You lost count. For the doctor, it's always like, I don't have the luxury of just kind of being wallowed in, like, stuff like that. I do care about people. It's not that the doctor doesn't care, but the fact of the matter is he moves on. He finds a way to move on. And, you see it like that look in Bill's face, like, because I'm sure when Bill hears that, she's like, so if something happened to me, you'd care for me a moment, but then quickly move on. Like, the fact of the matter is, in her, like, at that time, it's like, my life means that very little, in the grand scheme of things. Like, people's lives mean that little to you, but it's like, the doctor does care, he does try to save people, but it doesn't change the fact, because the fact of the matter is, you have a very different perspective when you've lived as long as he is. He's like 2,000 years old, so it's like, yeah, you're going to be very, very cynical, because the fact of the matter is, because you've lived that long, you've lost people over and over again. And almost to a certain extent, it numbs you to a certain level of, like, you will get attached to people, but then you know that on some shape or form they will go, whether it's like old age or whatever the circumstances may be. Once again, that's kind of why he pushes people away. He can't help it because, like, the fact is he's lived so long, he does get lonely, and it does seem like he pushes people away, but he can't help but pull people closer because of that same thing. It's like, it's such a conundrum. It's like, you don't want to be alone, but you don't want to endanger people, especially because it means these endangered people will eventually, something will happen to them and you'll lose them. It's like, you can always travel through time, you age at a very particular rate, and it's like that person will always die, but you will always live past everyone that you've encountered. So like I said, at least kind of a sour taste in your mouth. But it does seem like that Bill later on in the episode is kind of like, yeah, I'm okay with that. And in fact, that she even, like, sticks her tongue out at the doctor, even saying, like, it's like, yeah, her and the doctor were arguing, but the fact of the matter is they moved on. So it turns out that basically there's this guy named Sutcliffe who's basically keeping this creature bound, like, underneath the ice. It's chained and everything. Turns out that this thing isn't like an alien. It's one of those things that's like, it's been here the entire time. People just don't notice. Actually, kind of, since we're on that subject, it's kind of what Bill brought up about the TARDIS. It's like, aren't you worried about people finding TARDIS? It's like, no, you humans, you're a very interesting species, and the fact is that it's amazing how much you don't notice. But the fact of the matter is, like, I love that there was a conversation, like, obviously they went to confront the dude, Mr. Sutcliffe, which I love. The fact is that, like, there's a moment where Bill picks up a brick and she's like, oh, it's just mud in him. And she kind of smells it, and you see the look of disgust on her face, and she drops it, and she's just like, and I love, once again, it's one of the beautiful things that this show does that I feel like I should commentate on. It's the way they BS their way around, especially the doctor. He kind of, like, circles around and just like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is, oh, these carts, does anyone know these routes? Have you inspected them yourself? It's like, oh yeah. It's like, oh yeah. Oh, does Mr. Sutcliffe know you're here? It's like, yes. And he turns to Bill, does he know we're here? And she's like, yes, of course. He invited us himself. It's like, yeah. Oh, you don't want to cross Mr. Sutcliffe. It's like, you're so good at BSing, and I love it. You make it so easy. I mean, obviously you get people to they fill in the blanks for you, and you just kind of be like, yes, and just kind of improv upon it. So, but nevertheless, they end up confronting the guy, and obviously the doctor's like, yeah, let me talk to him. And she's like, what do you mean? It's like, you kind of have an anger issue. She's like, what? He's like, no, you have to specifically say, you kind of have a bit of a temper. She's like, what? Okay, maybe a little bit. And he's like, yeah, this is a situation that needs tact. There's a point where passion is good for fighting, but reason is good for winning. So, like, hey, just, let me handle it, because obviously he's a guy that feeds people to this monster. He keeps it chained up. The fact is, he's using kids as labor, to do what he needs to do. Because basically the whole thing is that basically he's taking advantage of this whole situation, because this whole situation has been like a family-run thing, essentially, for a very long time, for as long as, in his words, the records could go back. But essentially, his family has been feeding things to this, because the thing it produces, it's crap. Essentially, it's better 1,000 times better than coal. The fact is, it lasts 1,000 times longer. The fact is, it can even ignite. It can burn even underneath water. So it's some pretty good stuff. But the way the doctor kind of phrased it almost seems like it's more for intergalactic travel. It's more fuel for that source. But obviously they're using it for like a furnace, industry stuff here on Earth. Once again, 1814 in London. And in the moment the guy comes in, he's like, and he sees Bill. He's like, what is this creature doing here? And just like, blah, 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 blah. And then the doctor punches him. Pow! And she's like, what? He's like, yep. So age 31. I forgot. Also like had low, his iron was low or something like that. And it's like, yep, that was like in the sense being like, yeah, that was real racism. Yeah, there ain't no way that's an alien. That's got to be like a real racist human. It's like, yep. But then there was also that good speech that the doctor gave, and I guess it kind of reflects a lot of the earlier conversation he had with Bill. And the fact is that basically it's like, you think just because you're kind of top tier that you're rich, it's like, what makes your life more important than any of the people that you're feeding to this thing? Like the little boy, Spider that died. The fact of the matter is that your life is as valuable as his, because progress isn't like by industry. Progress is by the value of the life of those who aren't privileged, but those who aren't privileged, because you're essentially, if their life can be valued, like, I'm not phrasing this wrong because the show did it so beautifully and elegantly. Essentially that if a life that's not privileged is valued so little, that means there hasn't been much progress. Progress is meaning that every life is valued no matter where you fall in the class system, whether you're upper class, lower class, middle class, whatever the case may be, that your life is valued as much. And if you treat someone who's not privileged, who is of the lower class, who's living on the streets, if you treat them like garbage, then that just reflects upon you, just shows you that your value, like that they're not the garbage when your value is garbage because you value them as that. And it's, he's like, that's how you truly like, that's what determines the value of a species, and I guess really it's kind of reflective upon himself. It's like, it's like, am I a true representation? I mean, I guess in a sense to me, I look at it as like, is it a true representation of my species, of the Gallifreyans and Time Lords? Am I a good representation of it? I'm sure like that kind of got him thinking about it. And you even see Bill kind of like it resonated with her. She even later on is like, so you're really 2,000 years old? He's like, yeah, why? She's like, I just want to know how long it takes to be able to say a speech like that. She's like, it's well worth the wait. But when it also came down to this whole creature situation, it was a bit like, it's still an interesting conversation all across the board. Like, one is like, the fact is, the doctor brought it up earlier, the fact of the matter is, he only kills people if it's necessary. It's not like he goes out of his way to do it, but it's like, the circumstances needs to be done, then it has to be done. Because it's kind of a similar situation in this episode, because obviously, like, Bill gets struck by it again when she sees that guy dying in front of her. He's a bad guy and all that, but still doesn't justify him, like, he doesn't deserve to be killed like that. Now, along those lines, it's like, about freeing this creature, and she's like, well, what about why would we free it? The fact of the matter is, this thing eats humans, obviously, so who's to say that when it gets free, that when we free it, it doesn't just chomp and kill like half of London? And the doctor's like, that's a chance we have to take. But the question comes down to is, what do you want to do? Because this isn't my world, this isn't my future. I will be on this world, I will protect this world, but the fact of the matter is you, it's humans who have to determine your history. The fact of the matter is, are you okay with knowing that your entire, like, London society is built upon the suffering of this creature? Which even Bill herself is like, she felt it, like that despair, like the doctor described it as like loneliness and despair, and she's like, she could feel it in that thing's like scream or yell. She could feel it resonate throughout her bones. So it's like, are you willing to let that thing do that? But I mean, because it's a tough decision, and that's why the doctor's like, it can't be my choice, it has to be yours. This is your world, this is your future, this is the life that you live that is determined by this choice. It's like, so I am, like, essentially, you're the boss in this situation, tell me what to do. And it's like, that's a very hard decision, because once again, like she was saying, like, this thing could easily go off and kill a ton of people, but the fact of the matter is, does it deserve to be chained up like it is? Who's to say, it won't go off and just not bother people? Which was even the conversation later on, being like, what if this thing finds its way to Greenland? And the doctor's like, don't worry, I'll check on Greenland afterwards. But there's even a moment where I think you kind of see Bill, like, this is how I'm interpreting it, but you see a moment where Bill kind of resonates with that too, like the whole, like, like if something like basically there's some people who won't run away. Basically, she's getting the kids to help her tell everyone to get off the ice. Some people aren't listening, and then at one point, like she's telling the kids just to run, and they're about to blow up the ice, and she closes her eyes, but there's people still behind her and everything. I guess it's a situation where it's like you try to save as many people as you can. Like the fact of the matter is these people won't go. Tough luck on them, and she says or braces herself for the explosion. Doesn't come because the doctor used it to kind of resonate basically not resonate. I keep using that word, I don't know why, but to make it blow up the chains and stuff to free the creature. So a very interesting development, just overall a fantastic episode. It's just like I said, I love that the fact of the matter is like I feel like they're kind of changing things up. Like to me, out of any of the doctors, Peter Capaldi has always been the most controversial in a sense of like who his different sides are. Obviously, with the other doctors, you've always seen their darker sides. That's always what I liked about Matt Smith's Doctor, the 11th Doctor, is just because the fact of the matter is he's such a goofy guy, but at the same time, when the time came down to it, he got serious, and like he had you saw that side of him come out. Some people, like I've heard people talk about the fact is they didn't appreciate that about his doctor because they felt he was too goofy, that they couldn't take him serious in the moments like that. To me, I took him even more seriously because of the contrast. I'm like, this is me. Oh, having fun and everything, and then this is me when demons run, when a good man goes to war. So that's probably like one of my favorite lines from this show. It's just like I just love that. Nevertheless, but the reason why I tell him controversial because it's always a sense of like I brought it up before, like the whole Clara situation. It seemed like she had to be his rationale, like she had to be like, hey, be nice to people. It's like that shouldn't have to be said, but it seems like obviously. Peter Capaldi's doctor is kind of like there's no filter there. There was also an interesting, really quickly because I'm thinking about it. I'll get back to what I was saying. Maybe I will, maybe I won't because I'm forgetful like that. But there was an interesting conversation where she's like, "Oh, we're going down there in diver suits." It's like, "Oh, we'll be fine, right? We're not defenseless." She's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." Okay, yeah, I mean we're defenseless, but don't worry about it. She's like, "Oh, why? Ooh, don't tell me. You have like a magical healing power," and you had the doctor just kind of looking at her. She's like, "Well, what's that about? Was that a bad question?" I'm like, ah. So, I mean, I do that for multiple reasons. So, I won't go any further about, there's the obvious reason, but there's another reason why I did that. I was like, okay, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? So, like, that might not mean anything, but like I said, I'm trying to be as vague as possible with that. So, nevertheless, getting back to what I was saying, I did just forget. Okay, nevertheless, okay, I remember now. The fact is that, it does seem like I said, he doesn't have the filter on that it almost seems like he doesn't care about people, especially like a lot of those earlier days in like season 8. It seemed like he didn't care about people. It's like people die, whatever. I moved on. It is kind of interesting, like because part of me thinks maybe in some shape or form. Well, now that I think about it, I know why he's a little different because he doesn't remember Clara at all. Any of their adventures, Clara helped make him that way, like made him a little more caring and stuff like that. So it does beg the question, like, is him caring at all? Is that a facade or is that real? Like it just puts an interesting twist on when you start really thinking about things. Like I might be 100% overthinking, but that was always a weird thing to me. It's like Clara was kind of his, like, hey, be a good guy type of thing. But it's like now that she's gone and he doesn't remember their adventures, he has a vague notion of it, but he doesn't remember everything in details and all that she represented for him. Like, is a good friend as well as someone to kind of keep in balance. So, but it does seem like Bill is going to be that too. And also the fact is that I like the fact is that she has a temper. Like she's definitely going to be one of those companions that's like isn't going to take like essentially deal with the doctor's bullshit. It's like, no, do this now or I'll get mad. And it seems like Bill seems like the type that would just kind of kick his ass if he doesn't like shape up or ship out, So obviously they end up getting back to present day because obviously they fixed up the whole situation so that the kids could move into dude's place and kind of mess with some things so that basically like they have a good living, and I guess any future generations could have a good living and stuff like that, making it seem like one of the kids there, it's like a essentially an heir to his estate and stuff like that. So obviously go back, no one remembers anything about a giant like fish monster, and she's like, Bill's like, okay, what the hell is that up with that? How can they not remember? The thing was there, and it's like, well, the fact of the matter is a lot of people were drunk that time, and it's like our species is so good at just being like, that didn't happen, things kind of, I guess that's where like folklore and legends come from and stuff like that. So, but also you have Naruto getting onto the doctor's like, you said you weren't going to travel or anything, like off-world traveling. I was like, okay, technically he hasn't done any okay, technically he did, but this particular episode he didn't actually do anything. It's like I went back in time. It's like, okay, see, these are my like drinking tea and coffee like attire. So let me be. I'm back here and everything. So, like I said, it's so interesting that it does seem like it's one of those situations where I feel like they've grown closer because like Bill and the doctor. It's like, you know, you fight a little bit because I just don't, like I said, I don't feel like, I don't know, it seems like a different dynamic, like and like I said, it's always different with each new companions. Different companions have different approaches. Some fall in love with the doctors, others just look at him and it's just like, hey, you're a cool dude to hang around. Like Rose and Martha kind of fell for him. Donna was just kind of like, oh yeah, you're cool, let's go on adventures. Amy might have had a slight thing for him beginning, but then obviously the whole her and Rory thing. So it's just like, hey, you're a good friend, so cool. And Clara is just kind of like, hey, we're good friends, cool. And I get the feeling it might be like that with Bill too. So I mean, at least that's my interpretation. Like obviously there's different, you know. I mean, especially when the Doctor originally got, like when Peter Capaldi's Doctor, the 12th Doctor, was like, yeah, you always thought of, you know, the 11th Doctor as your boyfriend. I'm not your boyfriend. Yeah, we're in this together, but like I'm not the same person. Like you fell in love with him. It's like, that's not, you know, so there was layers to that situation too, which obviously is still disappeared, but it's like, you know, the companions always, especially in Clara's case, I feel like she easily became like one of the Doctor's best friends. I mean, that's my opinion. So there is an interesting thing where Naruto is kind of like forced to kind of like, okay, he's off doing whatever he wants to. I'm the one that's kind of stuck dealing with this old vault situation here, not on the other side of, okay. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? What is inside the vault? He's like, just because the Doctor, he might be away, but the fact of the matter is I'm still here and I won't let you out. So, and he's kind of walked away a little nervous. It's immediately in my brain, I'm like, okay, we're going to end up finding out later on that's the Doctor knocking, isn't it? Time travel. I just got that inkling. He's going to be somehow on the other side of it. Him or Bill, or him and Bill are knocking on this. I was like, okay, we're in the vault now with whatever the hell is in there, whoever's in there. And it's like, we're trying to get out. It's like, oh, we need, you know, so maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. But I got this inkling like, okay, there's that. I mean, whatever the case may be, that thing is deadly enough for them to kind of seal it away. So have no idea. I'm very interested to find out about it. Every season does have its own mystery. Well, the seasons typically have their mysteries, and it seems like this is going to be this season's big mysteries. Like, what's inside the vault? What is this oath you made? Who did you make it to? What was it that forced you to make the oath? Those type of questions. So, like I said, overall, very fantastic episode. I'm very eager to see what goes on in next week's episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Class. Another fantastic episode. This show does such a stellar job. To me, like, what makes this episode so good too is it's a very heavily character development episode. It's not like to a certain extent, it's like some great battle episode. So it's like, no, you learn a lot more about your characters, find out more about their background. That's what this, I'm a sucker for. I keep bringing it up all the time. Like, I never realized that until I've gotten older, but that's what I love most about a character, learning about people. I love it in stories and stuff, like, ooh, how did you become who you are, and what do these developments mean, and why are you the way you are, and, you know, stuff like it's so good. I love characters. I love stories. And to me, what makes a story so good is its characters, and this show does a phenomenal job of its characters. Nevertheless, like, in this episode, we're dealing with a creature named the LinkedIn. Basically, it's a creature that it basically, the way Quill kind of puts it, it's basically a chameleon. Basically, it takes on the form of someone that you lost, that you held dear. Like in this particular case, the first person we really see it hit is Tanya, because this particular day is the 2-year anniversary of Tanya's dad. When you had that little montage at the beginning, like, even that little bit is enough to make you go, man, that sucks, because it's like you see all the fun, you see her mom and her dad get together, her being born, her chilling with her brothers and everything, and then just one instant, like, she's having dinner, like her dad beside her and everything, and then the next moment we see tears on her face and they're taking her dad's body. It's like, dude, it's like, even in that short amount of time, it's enough to hit you to be like, man, that sucks. And so obviously this thing's taken on the form of her dad, and it's basically saying like, oh yeah, that basically the LinkedIn gathers up all the souls that basically it has like a huge conglomerate of souls, and the moment you die, like take my hand now, and the moment you die, when your time naturally comes, you'll become a part of the link, and it's so like your soul will be able to find my soul. Essentially, we'll be together. It's kind of a way of kind of ridding yourself of all your anguish and grief and stuff like that. Obviously, for Quill, it takes on the form of her sister. For Ram, it took on the form of Rachel. Granted, he never had to deal with the situation. I did like that little jump scare moment because obviously we see like throughout the conversation between Ram and April that the computer keeps freezing, and it's like she sees April and this kind of freezes, and all of a sudden she like it jumps and it's like shows you her at the computer, and it just like freaks April. I was like, that was a little jump scare, and I appreciate it. I was like, that was pretty good. That was very perfectly done in that situation because they already set it up that it's freezing a little bit. So it's like it's just such a good thing. It's like little things there, and then it shows you, oh, bam, because we were setting it up for that. Did it scare me? No, but I appreciate it nonetheless. So I'm not one of those people that like, oh, screw jump scares. I'm like, oh man, you got me with a jump scare. So. But I appreciate that it got April. That sucks. But like it's telling you all these things. In particular, Tanya's dad's telling her all these things, like, "Oh, I know all this stuff about you and stuff like that." Obviously, I'm your dad. Even explaining the story of why he calls her Puddle. Basically, a horse pissed and she jumped all in it, and she was like, "Puddle, puddle, puddle." So that's cute. But also, we ended up learning about how, like, a relationship she had with her dad. Like, basically, her dad was a cop, and everyone was always worried in the family, like, what if he doesn't come home this time? But he always did, and he'd always did an interesting thing where he'd always come home no matter how late it was, even if it was, like, super early in the morning, he'd always peek in and check on her and watch her. The fact of the matter is he did that because when she was, like, super young, she did the same thing to him, because the fact of the matter is that she was always afraid that maybe one day she'd wake up and turn around and they're gone. So that was her way of always making sure, like, nope, you're here, you're still here, good. And so that's something, a habit that he kind of picked up too, because for her, she, even at the young age, she's like, yeah, not everything good will last forever. And it's like, it turns out it didn't. And she even blames it. She's like, I hated you for the fact that you left and everything. It's like, obviously, she knows it wasn't by choice, but the fact of the matter is, it's still, you're gone. She's grieving. Like, she's sad. She lost her dad. So probably in her brain, it's just simple, like, hey, why didn't you hold on? Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you stay? Why did you just have to let go and leave? Why'd you have to leave us behind? Why'd you have to leave me behind? So, and that stuff, it's like, it's such a heartbreaking conversation. So, like I said, I'm kind of interested that never happened with him and Rachel. But then again, I guess they make up for it by making April and Ram kind of get closer, which they kiss. Did not see that coming. Like, if anything, I thought like Ram and Tanya maybe, simply because like they were the first ones amongst the group. Like, that's the first person Ram ever really got close to. But now it seems like he's getting close to April. I mean, by the time the end of the episode happens, like, it seems like they're all kind of like, oh yeah, we're a good team. I'll get to that soon enough. But we learn more about April's like family situation, and I don't think I brought it up last episode, but she brought it up a little bit more. Like, the reason why, like, her dad was like a folk musician, very good. Didn't come home that often. It got less and less, and then whatever the situation is, he got drunk. He started drinking more and more and more. Wasn't the same person anymore. And at one point, he literally, while her mom and her were in the car, he literally drove off like somewhere and basically almost killed them. Her mom got paralyzed by it. She was like, yeah, April was okay, but her dad, obviously, he was like, oh, I was trying to commit suicide, but he still went to jail for it and everything, rightfully so in that situation. So he could have easily killed them, no matter what the circumstances is. I'm very curious to see, like, the fact is, I feel like they're planting those seeds, because obviously they planted the seed about Tanya's dad, and obviously that became a thing in this episode. So I'm assuming the same thing might happen about that storyline about her dad. That might play some role in this later on. I mean, maybe he'll get out of jail. I don't know. We'll kind of have to see. But because April brought up an interesting thing, because like Ram's like, why do you have to be so sensible? Essentially, why do you have to be so calm, cool, and collected about everything? She's like, I have to be. The world doesn't make sense, and the fact of the matter is, if I don't be sensible, if I don't kind of keep my cool and composure, I'm gonna break, because that's what the world would do to you in this state. And it's like, I can either kind of keep my senses about me, or I can let the world break me. And she chooses to let her keep her senses. It's like, she won't let the world break her. Like, for example, she's like, I play folk music, not because of my dad. I won't let what my dad hold me and my mom down, because like, for every moment that I'm thinking about it and letting it bother me or hold me down or be stricken by it. It's one more day or time. It's time that he's winning. I won't let him have the satisfaction of it, like it being a thought or concern. I play folk music because I love it. It makes me feel good. So it was just, like I said, beautiful little moments. Obviously, we learned more about, I mean, Quill's people as well as Charlie's. In Quill's case, like, it's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is that amongst her people, they fight the young, try to kill them. In her case, her sister, which is what it takes on the form of, that it goes, it's like, try to kill her right out of the nest, because it's like, oh, that's how we know who's tough and who's not. You know, you have to survive, like, who can really survive. And in Charlie's case, him and his boyfriend, I thought his name was Mason. I think it's something else. But essentially, his boyfriend is like, yeah, he got kicked out of his house because him and his family had an argument. It's like his dad and mom were kind of okay with the whole thought of him being gay because it was a conversation that never repeatedly came up. But now the fact is that he has Charlie as a boyfriend, it makes it all too real. So his parents kicked him out. So he's going to be staying with Charlie and Quill for a while. I was wondering if he'd play a part in this or not, because obviously you have Tanya, April, Charlie, and Ram being the main four, but I was like, oh, maybe he'd play some part in this too. Once again, in these type of situations, you always feel bad for the significant other. Even if you're a part of the main group, if you're the significant other, there's a good chance it's like, hey, you might get got. But in this particular case, you're like a degree separation from the main group, so it's kind of like there's a good chance you might end up dead. I think a perfect example of that, I can't remember because it's been such a while, but Jack's significant other, was it Yakeem or something? I can't remember. He ends up, spoilers, he ends up dying at like the end of season 3? Maybe? One example of like, yeah, like even in amongst the main group, if you're got a significant other, it's like you're likely, it's all, nevertheless, not the point. I mean, it's kind of the point, but moving on. But the fact is that Charlie's like, in his world, like, love isn't really the thing that it is. It's almost like a contract, like how, I mean, sad way, like, I always feel weird saying it in a sad way because that is some people's culture. I don't like that. I feel like you should be able to marry out of love. But who's to say, like, what doesn't start off as an arranged marriage eventually turns into love? You know, that does happen. But it's like, you know, I feel like when you love someone, it should always be by choice. But for Charlie, he's like, and amongst his people, it's like, that's not the case. Love is kind of a situation where it's like, there has to be benefits to it. Like, even he talks about his parents. It's like, to his parents, he was never, like, there was no, like, coming together when it came to his parents, because his parents, he was just kind of like a thing. It's like, you know, you're a tool that we can use to make some political moves, like basically in a sense. So it's like, to him, like, to be loved by someone, it's very interesting because it's like it's something he can't. It's not like the love he's familiar with. So it kind of puts things in a very interesting perspective. So, but obviously around town, you see that this thing has struck everywhere. It's taking people, it's very interesting to basically, like, once you take its hand, it grabs you and sucks you up. Basically, this thing has been feeding off of grief. I mean, I like the whole situation with Quill where she's like, oh, Charlie, like, good, thank goodness you finally came up here from your little session up in your room. So now that you're here, your life is in danger. Now I can do stuff. It's just like, so bring me in. She ends up kicking it in the face and then, like, stepping on its hand. It's like, okay, bring me a knife. No. Bring me two. And Charlie comes back with, like, the thing you use to kind of cut plants a little bit and a screwdriver. She's like, what are you doing? Where's the knife? He's like, yeah, I don't like knives. It's like, okay, I can't actually do it. So I want you to come over here, stab it in his hand. And Charlie's just like, she's like, go ahead, take your time. And he goes, stab. And so, like I brought up earlier, like, she kind of refers to this thing as a chameleon because it's like, yeah, you got it wrong. The Lambkin isn't people. It's a person. It's one single thing. All these tentacles around are just its limbs, essentially. It's not multiple things. It's just one person that's basically trying to draw people in so that it can feed on them. Because even one point when, like, one dude got snatched up in the street to do that ram saw, like, at Tanya's place, her dad was like, And even Tanya kind of noticed at one point he was licking his lips like he just tasted a delicious steak. He's just like, oh yeah, like, you know, trying to, like, skate around and all that. But it's like that's, yeah. But basically it's saying whatever it can to feed on grief because it's like, it's traveled to different worlds, but basically the crack at, you know, the academy allowed it to kind of come through. It's its first time here in this world. So it's never really had human souls before. Like I said, this is all some act that obviously fit this role to be like, oh, this is what I look like, to try and draw people in, a false sense of security to get in the lower guard. In this particular case, Tanya's dad is trying to talk to her. It's like, oh, come here, I can ease all your pain. It knows exactly what to say because it's like drawing Tanya in. Because obviously Tanya's extremely smart. So at first she's kind of like pulled back from it. She's like, no, you're not my dad. Yeah, that's what my dad told me. But then eventually as the conversation goes on, you hear like, yeah, dad. And she's like talking to it like that. It's like, referring to his dad and everything. So it's slowly getting there. But obviously Ram and April show up in time to help. Granted, it all comes down to Tanya, because basically Tanya, like, she's like acting like she's giving into the thing, and it touches her, but then like it starts getting sick and turning green because she's not feeding it. Her like, oh, it's like you wanted to feed on my closure. It's like, my closure isn't yours to have. What you can have is my anger. The fact is, I hated my dad, and just all those feelings, like, you can have it, and it starts poisoning it. Not enough to kill it though. But then Quill gets a vehicle and kind of like, I don't know what those buses are called. They're like double top buses, and ends up ramming it and yanking it out the window, and it's not dead, it just kind of retreats for a while. So it's like, hey, we kind of dealt with it. And so an interesting thing, and it's almost a sad thing at the end of the episode, we see, well, nearing the end of the episode, we see everything happening. Like, everyone's like together, it's like, oh man, we're good. Oh, you're safe. Yeah, what took you so long? It's like, I know. And you see Quill kind of on the outside, and it's like, it puts things in a very interesting perspective, because it's like that thing pretending to be her sister. It's like, yeah, I'm here to help you. I'm trying to ease things for you. And it's like, they're a group, but she's on the outside. She's like, oh my God, this is so disgusting. But you see that almost loneliness in her eyes, because it's like, even if Charlie doesn't have the rest of his people, I mean, at least to everyone else's knowledge, I mean, we know as the audience about the Captain of Souls, but the Quill, it's like, she's on her own, because even amongst them, she's still on the outside. Because, obviously, like, none of them really like her. It's like, because even Ram's like going on about like, man, she's a terrible teacher. It's like, how can no one notice that she's a crappy teacher? And obviously Charlie looks at her, is like, yeah, you're a terrorist. Like, her mind, she's like, I'm a freedom fighter. It's like, no, you're a terrorist. So I don't know. It's kind of sad. And you see her come back and everything, and then she sees, like, obviously the thing. It was kind of interesting too that the thing could form a gun, because it was like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is, grab this gun. That's all you have to do. It's like, oh yeah, we fight. The kind of like, because last time you said, like, next time we meet, like, oh, you would, tear out my heart and everything. But the gun is obviously turning whatever that thing is made of, like dirt or dust or whatever, and it's on the ground. And so she's like, yeah, I am a warrior. And I am a Quill, I am a leader, like, basically, I am a warrior, and a warrior needs a gun. So she's still, I'm sure, like, going forward, she's going to try to find a way to skirt around that whole situation. Like, oh, I technically can't fight, because, Charlie has to be in danger for her to fight. And even then, like, she can only probably do hand-to-hand, not probably, definitely can only do hand-to-hand stuff. She can't actually use a weapon. That's why she has to get other people to use the weapon, so. Like I said, overall, a fantastic episode. A very good, like I said, it's just, I love character development. And that's the main thing about this episode. Obviously, it was a threat that was going to affect everyone in town, because it literally got everyone in town, except for, like, the kids and Quill. They're the only ones that weren't affected. But at very least, it's just, like, more so than anything, it was just showing you, learning more about the characters that we come to know so far. And that's, like, I always appreciate episodes like that. It doesn't have to be some, like very action-y packed type of situation. So, kind of showing you, like, that it's kind of something similar to Doctor Who. Like, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't have to be a full-blown fight to fight. You can be smart and find a different way to go about dealing with these situations. Like I said, brought up last episode, like, April was like, are we just going to kill people to deal with these situations? We got to find a different way. And it's like, oh, luckily we were able to find a different way. I mean, I'm sure, like, I wonder how she would have felt about killing this thing. But, like, once again, it's not dead. It's just kind of retreated for now. So it's like, hey, it's going to be a little more reluctant to come back to this world. So very interested to see where we go in the next episode. It does seem like, really quickly though, it does seem like the very ending shows that it seems like Tanya has finally, like, obviously she's always going to be sad, but it does seem like it finally gave her complete closure on the whole situation. I mean, the thing is, like I said, I was actually surprised about the whole Ram situation, and Rachel is like, that was never, like, he ran from home, so it was never the whole, like, oh, here, let me talk to you. Like, maybe in some way, shape, or form, Quill kind of got some closure, maybe, possibly. Because apparently they also have an interesting belief too, that basically your soul disappears when you die. There's no, like, oh, your soul will be a human. It's like, no, they don't believe in that. Like, obviously there's the whole soul cabinet situation where it's like, oh, once you die, your soul goes in there. But I'm sure, I don't know if the Quills fall under that same category of, like, our souls will go in there too, but their belief is like our souls disappear the moment we die. They die with us. So But at the very least, it does seem like Tanya at the very least has gotten some closure. Like, obviously, it's not going to be an easy thing, but obviously, it's a situation. It's like, yeah, talking with her mom and dad about it, and, you know, it makes her happy and everything. And she's like, you know, finally getting this, like, even though it was under this false pretense, she got to say what she needed to say, feel what she needed to feel. You know, I think probably like letting that thing take some of her anger, or take a lot of her anger. Like, I'm sure that eased her mind a bit, and now she's able to say goodbye to her dad. So whether that's going to be the case for Ram or not, like I said, we'll just kind of have to see going forward. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.